Greetings, everyone, and welcome to ParanormalX. My name is Gary Buechler. I come to you from Nerdrotic. I cover the good, the bad, the ugly of pop culture. I also cover the strange, the paranormal, the high strangeness, as we say, on Forbidden Frontier. I ran a comic book store in San Francisco. Some of you may have heard, maybe not, for 10 years or so. And then I jumped into doing YouTube full time, which has been kind of fun. And I've been able to cover some good topics and some bad ones. This is one of my favorites, the supernatural. From comics to cosmic anomalies, we cover it all here. So whether you're here to explore ghost stories, unravel UFO sightings, or dive into the depths of unexplained phenomenon, I'd love to do that. You've come to the right place. Let's get started on today's journey into the paranormal. Today on the ParanormalX program, we're thrilled to have its founder, or one of its founder. Are you a founder, Josh Anderson?
I'm not. I'm an original author. But
you're
I'm
an
not,
original
I'm not
author
of ParanormalX. I don't want to take credit for something I didn't do.
Oh, I would totally do that. What have you done? What would people know you from? You've done a couple things. You've written a couple books, I hear.
I've written about 200 books. A lot of them are for the school and library market. A very small number of them are on time travel and science fiction, like the ones we're going to talk about today. And I'm a writer and a dad in Los Angeles.
A dad. That's good. I'm a dad too.
Yeah. How old are yours? Mine are 10 and 13.
Oh, wow. Those are good ages. Mine
are
adults.
Oh, okay.
Both adults now. 28 and one just turned 18. One just graduated from high school.
Congratulations.
Thanks. It's sad. Enjoy it. It's really sad.
I'm trying to squeeze every minute. They're my best friends in the whole world.
Hell yeah. First, Josh, so not everyone probably tuned into our last show. So what is your connection to Weed Inc. and quantum physics?
Sure. So I wrote the 6-book series called Time of Death that Weed Inc. and quantum physics is based on. And the first issue, which is available now on Kickstarter, is a very small part of book 1. So one of the things that I'm really, really excited about, and having seen the incredible work by Carlos and Felipe and Mark on the first issue of the comic, is there is so much more out there. There's so much more to come. Reading it and knowing all the teases that we have in book 1 and now in issue 1 of the comic, it's just so exciting to see all these things that I know we're just seeding in the tiniest of ways, which become these major parts of the Time of Death universe, as I like to call
it. I love the concept of using basically Art Bell stories as fodder for storytelling. I think it's just rife with it, right? And I'm surprised more haven't done it. Now, there's a guy named Chris Carter who did it pretty well, but this is really cool. So what makes Weed Inc. and quantum physics stand out as a story? What drew you to the original? You did the original novel adaptation. So what drew you to the story?
So, I've always written stories, and it's kind of the way I think. And one of the things that had always been in my head was this idea of a time travel prison story, in that, prison is so stifling. It's the most, and I've never, knock on wood, I've never served time. But it's the most closed circuit you can have. You've got very few options when you're in. And time travel is the opposite. Time travel is, you can literally write a time travel story about essentially anything in the universe. And the idea of mixing those two is where the initial kernel came in. And then there was inspiration from, everything from Back to the Future as a kid to even something like The Time Traveler's Wife. What readers of issue 1 won't know yet, and is that there's a pretty significant love interest that will play more than just the typical love interest role as Kyle's story continues. So that was actually an inspiration, even though you wouldn't think so if you were to read issue 1.
Which I did, and I liked.
Good, I'm glad. It's great. Art is fantastic.
The art's really good. I see a lot of independent comics, No disrespect. A lot of people are honing their skills on their own, and they need to keep doing that. But this was pretty good. So I've been to prison. I can promise you, it's stifling. It's terrible. At least the people on my channel know my story. I'm a grateful recovering addict. And you do start entertaining thoughts like you could be there's no atheists in a foxhole. It's kind of a similar thing, and you start entertaining all kinds of crazy thoughts to get the hell out of there or just escape in some way. So I think that's a pretty cool concept. At least it speaks to me a little bit.
I'm glad. And Kyle is given the chance to, use time travel to address what put him in prison in the first place, and a horrible mistake and a horrible tragedy. So I think that interplay has been, it was a lot of fun to write. I've never had as much fun writing as I had when I wrote Time of Death almost a decade ago now.
Oh, wow. And it starts out pretty dark, folks.
Yeah.
I will say that. So how's the Kickstarter going? Are you happy with everything? It looks like it's funded. It hit its funding goal.
It's funded. It's fun. It's fun to look every day. And even now that we've hit the goal, we're still ticking up every day. Where hopefully we'll kick into that next level, and and we'll let this roll into the next issue, because I think people are going to love the first issue. I was blown away when I saw it. It's a crazy thing to have, when you write books, they exist, and there's a cover image and there's the text, but the images all existed up here until I saw this. I was like, that is how it looks. And so they did such a good job of taking what was on the page and really, just adding to it and blowing it out.
I've always said it's the perfect medium. You're not limited by a massive budget. You're limited by your imagination. It's always been my favorite. And because in the mainstream, it hasn't been doing spectacular, it's created a hunger for independent comics that I think is great. And this is how, culture progresses, right? Things get too corporate. We go back to the independent, and it just cycles through. Hopefully this, this independent era is like one of the greatest. That's what I'm hoping for. So, have you had any interesting feedback that you've actually found productive and valuable from the Kickstarter, from the comic comments or any emails?
Just the excitement that we've seen, just how quickly we were fully backed, and how honestly, where this is independent. So a lot of who I shared it with were friends, family, colleagues, and and sharing, having gotten the advanced look at the full first issue, I was able to share that around in a very small circle, and everyone's just been blown away. I think, for a long, it's been a while since I wrote the novels. And so it's an interesting thing to, hear people like, gosh, you were writing that a while ago. And I'm like, no, but you got to understand, this is big. And so to have something like this come about and really just see it come to life, the feedback, it's been universally positive. Truly, Carlos is his artwork, and, and Felipe putting everything together. And of course, working with Mark Victor, who is a legend.
Yes.
Poltergeist. What more is there to say? I would be, as Mark was working, to develop the comic, I get a phone call sometimes, and he'd ask me, he'd be like, so on page 32, what was Kyle's reasoning for, and, we go back and I get to relive, where was my head at? Why did Kyle? And I sometimes have to go to book 4 to say, oh, that's the reason he's doing that, because that's going to pay off later. And that's what he was thinking. And so it was just so much fun to work with such a good, strong team. And like I said, there is so much more content. This is going to be, I'm just excited to someday, hopefully not too far in the future, look out at the entire Time of Death series on, and potentially have it go even past the end of the novels.
I hope it does. That would be brilliant. And Mark Victor is I got to talk to him last week. Funny guy. Guy.
He is.
I like him, man. Poltergeist, pretty good. One of my favorite movies of all time. I just showed it to my kid for the first time. Like, I don't know why it took me so long, because I saw it when I was 12.
Yeah,
So
I've got 10 and 13, as we said, and I'm just getting there. I'm like, because my 10-year-old, of course, has been seeing older kid stuff forever because he's got an older brother. So I think we're getting there. I think that'll be one of the next few weekends.
back in the days when that was a PG movie.
Oh my God.
So again, we talked about the artwork. It's good. It's
It is.
legit good. Can you tell us about the people behind the comic book?
Gosh, well, Carlos Reno is the artist. Felipe Caño puts everything together. He's done the panel story and layout adaptation, and of course, Mark has written the comic book. And they, it was all adapted from my book's Time of Death, and we're just, it's so vibrant and beautiful. And because Kickstarter is all about community, it's been really nice to work with this small community to bring something to that larger comic book community.
Well, it serves the niche, right? And it creates this huge opportunity for people if they have the wherewithal, right, to do it on their own, take out all those middlemen and women and the corporate barriers and the gatekeepers. Now you got to get the word out. That's the hardest part, but I think it will, as time goes on, because Kickstarter and Indiegogo have been around for a decade, and they're still, I still see them as in their infancy, because there's always been a huge independent scene, but that's still been controlled by big companies.
It is 100%, and this is about as opposite of that as you can get. I mean, I just want to explain, these novels were, I give so much credit to Mark, because Mark has been at the mountaintop, the apex of Hollywood. And these books were written for an educational publisher. They were seizing on the binge watching craze of the mid 2010s when Netflix was becoming, that it was becoming ubiquitous in everybody's living room. And a small, educational book publisher decided to do these 6-book series of these, shorter novels, and try to seize on that for older teens and struggling adult readers. And Mark didn't look at the fact that these books were not bestsellers at Barnes and Noble. He took a look at the first book, he was into it, and he kept reading, and he gave me a call, and he's like, I want to do something with these. And that's not everybody. I can tell you. I mean, I work in pretty close proximity to Hollywood, and that's not everybody in this town. So it's about as independent as it gets. These were not books that got in front of as many people as I certainly hoped they would when I was writing them. And that's nobody's fault. That's just the nature of the forum I was writing them in.
Yeah. So you have at least 4 planned here in the series that will all be released in the next 12 months. Yep. You gotta you get them all, and you find out what happens to Kyle and his I guess is it an epic journey? Right now the journey's not so nice, but yes. Why you've already talked about like why you're passionate about this, but how do you identify great stories? That's a good question. I think that's a question that's going around Hollywood right now. How do you identify a great story?
It is. And I'll tell you, I think about how many, I watch a lot of, as a storyteller, I read a lot, I watch a lot of movies, I watch a lot of TV, and I think there's a larger percentage of entertainment that I enjoy as I'm watching it than I think about afterward. And that's it. Does it stick with me? Is it a story where I'm almost second guessing what that main character did, where I'm like, gosh, where there's more to it, where the first watch isn't everything. I'm thinking about it, and I almost get a second hit just, on my drive to work, just saying, gosh, I didn't think about that the first time I saw it. I think that's really what it is. It's what's sticking with me after I read or see something that really, that tends to be the indicator for me that something's just an incredible story.
Yep. The thing that inspires you, that has you talking about, I mean, that's why this YouTube sphere is here. I mean, there's certainly we're complaining about stuff, but we really want to love it. And, when we get that rare occasion where we walk out or I finish watching a One Piece, or or even Furiosa, which is, not a bad movie, not doing well, but not a bad movie. If your wheels are turning when you walk out, that's definitely like, yeah, I like that.
Absolutely. You can't blame fans for feeling invested. You can't blame someone for wanting to like something, for wanting to have a good experience, and honestly, for wanting to live in that world. And living in the world means identifying what you like better and what you like less. So the fan community is what makes all entertainment, from, those logos you have behind you to, something really grassroots like what we're doing that, I'd love to see grow one day into something that could be, on a logo behind you. You can't blame someone for having takes on anything they read, see, or ingest.
That's what fans have always done.
Yep.
All right. So link for the comic book is in the description. Do you have any final thoughts?
Gosh, just that, this was a wild ride to write. I wrote all 6 of these books in a year. And I think by the time you get through 4 issues, by the time you get through 1 issue, you're going to want to get to 2. By the time you get through 4, I'm hoping you're going to want to really see where this story goes, because everything you see in this first issue, from the ink blot, which was called a silk blot in the original. Yes. So I have to remind myself to, you have to make some tweaks, and that I love that. Every decision they made that wasn't exactly what was in the novel, I was like, better. And that's not something I think every author feels when they see their material adapted.
No.
Yeah. And I really I trust these guys, which is, a huge part of the reason we all came together for this. So, no, I think everyone is going to really want to see where this goes. And I certainly hope so. And I'm so thankful that a story that is grassroots, that was literally, I wrote this in the church coffee shop, and I'm not even kidding. I sat there because it was quiet, and I wrote this to get, away from the loudness of my house with young kids in it, just so I could do it. So to see this story come to life in a comic, I'm just very appreciative to everybody. And to you, Gary, thank you so much for having me on today.
Hey, thanks for coming on, Josh. Josh Anderson, everybody. Thank you very much. You could, again, the link is in the description or you could just go to Kickstarter and search ParanormalX.
Yeah.
And have a good one, man.
Thank you, Gary. You too.
That was my fault. I touched something I shouldn't have touched. But if you're around Nerdrotic at all, that's kind of normal. Not in a weird way, though. Hi, how's it going, Michael May? How are you?
I'm great, and you can also blame me if something happens. Just tell everybody it was my fault. Yeah.
No, it's totally. I'm a proud boomer, as the kids like to call me, even though I'm Gen X. So, what we're going to get into today, the core plot of Weed Inc. and quantum physics hinges on the idea of time travel. As such, to explore the ideas of the cosmic and time travel in general, we brought on a special guest, Michael May. Hello, Michael May. I'm going to give some of your background here because you've never heard it. Michael May is a performer, filmmaker, and podcast producer with a career that encompasses documentaries, TV, and feature films. As a co-founder of the multimedia company Fun Size Horror, I like that name, Michael produced hundreds of digital projects, 5 features, and 2 TV series. That's not very much. I'm just kidding. Digital projects under the helm have generated tens of millions of views online. Most recently, he produced the feature films 12-Hour Shift and Ghosts of the Ozarks. Hell yeah. And HCT Media, XYZ Films, and Magnolia Pictures. He has won the Best Director Award at the LA Thriller Festival. Did you know you won the Best Director Award at the LA?
I think so.
Thriller Festival. Yeah. Cool. And has been nominated for Best Director for the International Academy of Web TV Awards, and films have he has produced, have won awards at film festivals around the globe. How many awards have you won?
I don't know. Know.
That's a lot of awards.
Weird listening to your own bio. It's always I'm a little weirded out by it, but it's great. People need to know. There you go.
Michael is perhaps best known for creating and hosting docuseries Autobiography, and it's auto/biography, It's a true crime spinoff of autobiography Cold Cases. On Motor Trend TV, the series combined his favorite subjects, mystery, history, and classic cars. Hell yeah, I like classic cars. The experience inspired Michael to focus on his love of strange mysteries, and he can now be heard hosting the podcast, A Study of the Strange. Again, welcome, Michael.
Thank you. No, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you very much.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite topics because it's, well, one of my favorite shows. Doctor Who deals a little bit, used to be one of my favorite shows, deals with time travel. One of my favorite movies, Back to the Future. And I guess we're going to we'll get to the questions, but just to preface this a little bit, back in the day, there was only like a couple of models of time travel that was really explored. Back, we're talking way back when. Now there's so much more. Like, this is why it's used and somewhat overused in Hollywood, but there's still like ways to make it interesting. So I'm curious about this, because in the comic book we were just talking about the ink blot. The ink blot is a portal.
Yeah.
If we didn't explain that. How do you view time travel as a storytelling device? What do you think are the exciting possibilities? And which there are many, but what do you think has also been overdone?
So Josh kind of mentioned this, like time travel allows you to go anywhere you want and explore any kind of theme you want. And that's what I think is really great about it as a storytelling device, especially if I think the people that do it well, it has to be an integral part of the story. It has to propel the protagonist forward into the adventure he or she will be on, or it can be used, or I should say, or it can be used as a way for self-reflections, or that dark night of the soul that you want characters to go down. And then overdone, I don't know about overdone. I think people just have, I guess there's like an anecdote about how to use time travel in a story, which is if you can tell the story without the time travel element, you don't need time travel. But if you have to have it, then it's worth having. But yeah, I'm not sure about overdone. I know people it's definitely overdone. I just can't think of any specific examples. I think as long as you kind of base it in real current science, even if you branch off and kind of create your own fiction around it, you just have to have rules in whatever story you're telling and stick to those rules.
I agree with that. I think the biggest problem is not sticking to your own rules of time travel, and especially with people who, I don't know, there's this misnomer out there that people don't pay attention to stuff. No, people pay attention to stuff way more than they used to, and they're going to question it, and that's going to be challenging to writers. So how much credence do you lend to the possibility of actual time travel or time slips or time-related incidents? Do you view something that could be attainable for humans someday? Do you think this is even possible? And I'll ask a side question. What's your favorite theory?
Those are all great questions. So the thing that excites me about this topic is I love all things strange and mysterious. You mentioned in my podcast, The Study of Strange. I consume media like ParanormalX and anything with ghosts, Bigfoot, true crime, serial killers, any of this stuff. But I'm naturally a skeptic, and I love to try to debunk stories, or at least, act as best of a detective as I can to try to find the truth behind what happened in any of these kind of topics. But we know time is not linear in the way that you might think of it. And we know this from general relativity. We know, quantum physics and quantum mechanics, people have learned all these various different types of things they're testing and theorizing about. And time is just it's a crazy, crazy thing. And I think because of that, I do believe something is possible within time travel. It may not be like the movies. It may not be a DeLorean going 88 miles an hour, but I do think something like time slips, or some kind of ability to potentially travel through space and time very quickly, like a portal of some kind, something like that seems realistic to me. In our lifetime, probably not. But I do think that in the future, there's something to do with time. Even today, actually, CNN had an article today about scientists trying to put clocks on the moon, because time is obviously different on the moon than here, and they need to kind of study that for future potential bases on the moon and learn how that works. And relates to communication devices and all of that. So yeah, time is, I don't know if that answers your question, but time is a crazy, crazy thing.
It is. And I don't think we'll have the technology in our lifetime, but I am certainly open. I'm a big fan of Skinwalker Ranch. Okay.
Oh yeah.
I'm a big fan of that show. And one of the reasons I'm a big fan of that show is because I think it gets into something that we possibly could experience. There's so much science we don't know, magnetic anomalies that could create where we like a portal to where we could see a different time. I think there's some kind of natural thing that could possibly give us a glimpse.
My favorite kind of subject within this is something within sort of the time slip or viewing into other things, and that's affected some of my work. I'm actually writing a script that deals with that. I won't go too much into detail because hopefully one day it's made, but it combines a haunted house story with science fiction, and it deals with kind of seeing other times. Yeah. So anyway, I interrupted you.
No, you didn't. That's that. We want to hear from you. I think that's a good explanation for ghost stories, and that's obviously one of the theories out there that we can get into someday. By the way, subscribe for those of you watching on Nerdrotic Live. Subscribe to ParanormalX. Please give them a follow if you can. Hopefully, we'll do more stuff in the future. And as I embark on, I have my pop culture stuff, but quite frankly, this is my favorite subject. All of this stuff is my favorite subject. I have the most fun doing it. So I really appreciate them having me on. Okay. If you're approaching time travel in your fiction, what are the unbreakable rules? Or if you were advising someone else who wanted to write about it, what would you say to them?
I think we kind of hit on this a little bit already, which is you get to kind of create your own rules. And as long as you stick to those rules, you should be okay. And it really is up to you. I mentioned earlier, I think it is important to kind of research various theories out there in regards to time and how that may affect time travel or space-time or any of that, because I think you have, there's a danger of outdating your story. If you don't do any of that, you can still, fictionalize everything around it, but you should at least know what's going on in modern day science. Like H.G. Wells, The Time Machine. If that came out today, I don't think it would be a good story. It's a bit outdated in its science. So I do think doing some research and using that as a place to jump off from and sort of fuel your imagination is a great thing to do. But yeah, you get to create your own rules and you just got to stick to them. Can't break them.
Exactly. Like meeting yourself. There's always the meeting yourself thing, and in some aspects, it's like it could blow up the universe. In other aspects, it could lead to some fun. I like the string theory.
Yeah,
that's kind of my favorite, where you travel in time, but you just can't travel to your own time. You just create another one.
There's something I came across when I was researching the script I'm working on, because I was trying to decide, or not decide, but create the rules around a device that could create a way to travel through space very quickly. And you come across all these time elements. And some of the theories I read mentioned how you can create portals, and it has to do with quantum mechanics and parallel universes and all of that, which I'm not smart enough to go too deep into. But a lot of people talk about how you can't go back in time if you can travel through time, but you can travel forward in time. And I think with whatever you're creating, you can of course create stories to go back in time because no one really knows how it works. But I took that as a writer. I was like, that's interesting. If I use that as one of the rules, we might be able to see back in time, but we can't travel back in time. Just as an example of a rule set story. Yeah.
No, and it's like a simple thing that you just got to kind of turn off with with Star Trek or anything that uses a wormhole to travel or warp drive is. You wouldn't be in the same time. You get back, it'd be really messed up. Yeah. So, but you just kind of forget that stuff, and that's fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. What do you consider works within canon for time traveling story? I think you just kind of make up your own, right? What can writers learn from stories about working with time travel as a device?
This doesn't really answer the question specifically, but you made me think of just iconic time travel stories, and you can always learn from those. And Josh mentioned Back to the Future. I think that's one of the best structured stories ever. You can learn a lot from that. They also don't bog you down with how the time machine works. You only need to know what you need to know, and it's kind of left at that. Flux capacitor, 88 miles an hour, boom, there you go. And that's all you need. And I think you can learn a lot from that. Even like, it's a little different, but A Christmas Carol. A Christmas Carol is a time travel story. Scrooge goes to the past, present, future. And I think you can learn from that as well, even if you're trying to do something more sci-fi or what have you. But you can learn from a lot of these iconic stories for sure.
Absolutely. In the story, we've developed the main character as a fair bit of control over his time travel. That's Kyle. But of course, there are lots of great stories with characters travel through time by accident or overshoot their intended destinations. That's pretty much Doctor Who. The Doctor never goes where he intends to go. It's where the TARDIS needs him to go. But I digress. How do you view the idea intentionally of controlling as it relates to time travel stories? What possibilities exist in one kind of story versus another?
Ooh, again, it kind of depends on what the writers want to do. You can kind of do anything you want as a creative. And I do like, I read the first issue of Weird Ink, and I do love how it's set up. And you mentioned sort of the ink is kind of like a portal, I think is how you described it. And I think that's really interesting because it is, like I was talking about, kind of basing it on potentially modern day or current day theories about how time can be affected by portals or black holes or gravitational force fields and stuff. So it's set up very well. I don't really know how to answer the rest of that question. I apologize.
No, it's all right. Like time travel, I don't see it. It's a limitless possibility. That's why it's used so much in science fiction, because there are so many different ways to use it. And I mean, there's probably like 5 basic ways that you could just retell, and infinite number of variations. That's pretty much every story.
And nowadays you see this, it's very much in the zeitgeist, the whole parallel universe, multi-universe world, everything everywhere all at once. And I think I've kind of lost track of Marvel movies, but I know they've done some stuff in there, and that's very much in the zeitgeist. And I think that may be getting a little overdone to think about it, but because that's kind of current day science and what people are thinking about, that's an interesting avenue to take with time travel that we can still explore infinitely.
Right. Endgame did not set out any rules. So that's one of the biggest problems that I have with Endgame, the Avengers Endgame, is the rules are really what? But you can really push time travel so far now because of the concept of time not moving linearly at all. Like, and it doesn't have a progression. It exists, and it's based on gravity, where we have no idea where gravity comes from. We don't know what makes gravity, and there's a lot of things you can play with that, and especially with black holes, and now we're finding out that there's like micro black holes and all. It's like it's getting stranger. So as science gets stranger in their discoveries, the storytelling can get stranger for sure. And it just depends on the cleverness of the writer. You've done quite a bit of research on, I love Victor Goddard, Sir Victor Goddard, as you mentioned earlier. What drew you to this guy? Yeah, so
what you just said before you even asked the question kind of ties into it with this everything can happen all at once. Now, what it's past, present, and future are all kind of happening at once is one of the big thoughts out there. And Sir Victor Goddard, for those that don't know, he has a very famous story when it comes to time slips, which is the subject I got really interested in, and I've covered him on my podcast, and I'm doing research on some other stories that involve time slips as well. And time slips are essentially people that are experiencing some kind of, like, they appear in a different time. There's a lot of stories in England where people are walking down the street and they're going to the clothing store, but they show up and it's the 1960s and it's a record store, but then it's like right back to being present day again. And so a time slip is just this momentary experience in a different time. And how that happens, no one knows, if it's even real. And Victor Goddard has one of the most famous stories, and he's a very respected military veteran. I won't go into his whole bio to bore everybody, but in the 1930s, I think it was 1935 specifically, he was flying to somewhere in Scotland from England, and he was in a plane that doesn't have an enclosed cabin, and he flies and he passes over the Drim airfield in the UK, and he noticed that, oh, the Drim airfield's kind of been closed since World War I. No one really uses it anymore. The next day he's flying back and he gets stuck in a crazy storm, and he ends up over the Drim airfield again, but this time there's planes, and the planes are yellow. Military planes weren't yellow. The mechanics were wearing like brown or blue overalls. I forget which one it was, but it was like the wrong color for military overalls. And the airfield was now pristine and looked new again. And he continued on his trip. And it wasn't until I think 30 years later that he started sharing that story and said that he saw into the future that day, because in 1939 or 40, they changed the uniform color. Those kind of planes were now being used as test planes. And so he claims he saw into the future in this momentary time slip. And it's a fascinating story. And also because I love research, I'm such a nerd. I love research. And there's enough information about that story, enough writing, that I was able to actually research it really heavily, where a lot of time slip stories you can't. They're just kind of anecdotal. And his, you can actually go in, and there are theories about what really happened, which I'll save for a bit later. But if you do believe in time slips, and he definitely believed it was a time slip, although the term wasn't used, it is a fascinating story that is very intriguing when it comes to, is there a way to see it, or even experience on your own feet, or whatever, into a different time period momentarily. So it's really, really curious story.
It is. And you're right. There's very few we get to like really like. There's Flight 19 with the Bermuda Triangle, right? Yeah. Which has never been solved, by the way. There's a lot of people saying
those planes. Yeah.
And they lost search planes after that too, which and the weather was good. So I love it's the old adage, right? It's like most of it's probably BS, but 1%, if 1% is true, that's extraordinary. That's absolutely extraordinary and world changing.
Yeah, right? It is. And here, I'll go ahead and share some of this. It's in my podcast, but I love a good story. And I think finding the truth behind these things, if it isn't something supernatural or paranormal or whatever, I think finding out the truth behind it is just interesting. And when it comes to Sir Victor Goddard, he got very interested in mysticism's the wrong word, but very interested in like the spirit world and stuff later in life. And there's even a famous ghost photo that he took in World War I, which I actually found out the truth behind that photo too, and I don't want to spoil everything. But he got very involved with this kind of stuff. He wrote a lot about UFOs. And what's really interesting about his view of UFOs is he saw them more as interdimensional than aliens visiting Earth, which I think is very ahead of its time.
Way ahead of his time.
In like the 60s and 70s. But the story about him flying over the Drim airfield, I keep an open mind. Maybe it was a time slip, but what could have happened is they were using that airfield since 1933. So 2 years before he said it was abandoned. Since 1933, it was part of a like local flying club. And they would use it for other sort of municipal things and whatever. So the airfield was used. It was not abandoned. Yellow planes, there were yellow planes, but not in the military. And obviously the uniforms could have been different coveralls, colors, and whatever, because it wasn't a military airbase. And he also said that he saw a certain type of plane that hadn't been invented yet until 1939. Actually, that plane was invented. It was flying since 1933 as well. So he could have just been mistaken, and all those decades later took his own like interest in supernatural phenomena, and kind of like, we're humans. We all do this, where suddenly your beliefs affect the experience that you had years before. And so that is a theory. Again, it also could have been a time slip. I don't want to point that out, but it is interesting to know those details.
Well, yeah. And when he saw it abandoned, well, it's abandoned now. It's like I don't know about now, but the last picture I saw was from 2006. On an article, and it's completely abandoned. So maybe he just got it wrong.
It's the wrong time. That's interesting. Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah,
it's derelict now, or at least it was in 2006. Maybe they got something now. Where was he? I got all talking.
I messed you up. I took you.
No, you didn't. I messed myself up. All the time. Goddard believed strongly in the existence. Oh, we already talked about that. He believed strongly in the existence of the spirit world, and he's been on like Agent Alien, so a lot of people probably know the story of Victor Goddard and the unexplained. I think every weird history channel that has talked about him.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, especially that ghost photo. Anything with ghost photos. His photo he took shows up. Yeah.
In the upcoming scripted podcast, Kyle Cash is given an ink blot, which will effectively serve as the black hole that leads to the time tunnel, which we talked about. Real quick, I'm going to break in here for just a broad view of what the comic's about. There's a guy named Kyle. Something bad happens. I'm not going to spoil too much. Something bad, very, very bad happens, and he ends up in prison. He is visited in prison with a very strange way, a very X-Files way to get out. And there's a specific reason. It wasn't just like, oh, some random. There's a very specific reason for people in this book who can travel through time. So, and he fits the parameters, and that's why an organization contacts him. And so that's the whole premise and how it gets things going. Where each year, okay, so I'm going to backtrack a little bit, which effectively serves as a black hole that leads to a time tunnel where each year is marked by a portal. Would this mechanism explain Sir Victor's time slip?
Ooh, yes and no. I do think there is, again, I love the idea of like something that creates or affects space-time, some kind of device, or in this case, or the ink thing. And if it's warping and affecting space-time, maybe there is something similar happening that creates these time slips that could explain Victor Goddard's or anybody else's. In I think it's Liverpool in England, which is a really sort of a hotbed for these time slip phenomena. There are people that have theorized that it has to do with like the train subway. I think that there's like a circular something with the train tracks, and because of magnetism and movement and all this other stuff, that it's actually creating these rifts in space-time that people are experiencing. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's my long-winded way of saying potentially a device or some kind of mechanism that affects space-time. Who's to say that it wouldn't affect things around it as well, that allows you to observe into another time period?
Well, yes. If black holes can affect, well, they do affect space-time.
Of course.
What about our sun? And I mean, if you want to really go down a rabbit hole, Ben from Suspicious Observers gets into sun weather, and he gets into some weird stuff that's really cool. That would be, if anything, would make a cool story. And some of his predictions are actually kind of terrifying. So I don't know. I hope they don't come true. But within the book, when you travel in time, sorry if I'm spoiling anything. Time fights back. Time doesn't want you there. That's part of the reason. There's specifics. And you got to watch out for that, which creates another plot device that makes it, that gives you a very specific rule that makes it challenging. And, I don't know where it's going because I haven't read the next story, but it almost sounds like it puts a countdown clock on stuff, which makes it a little more, urgent. And I like that.
Yeah.
So have you had any firsthand encounters with strange time phenomenon, UFOs, ghosts, anything? You seen anything weird?
So I've seen some weird stuff. Nothing to do with time, unfortunately, because honestly, that kind of intrigues me more than anything else. But I've experienced a few things that like I thought were ghosts. Like when I was a kid, I thought I saw a ghost, and years later, I realized the light in our front yard created the very same shadow in the very same place that I thought was a ghost. And I was like, wait, maybe that was a lamp. But for a while, I thought I had seen a ghost. And the only thing I can really think of that I cannot explain, because again, I'm a natural skeptic, so I try to explain away everything. But I was working on this film years ago with my producing partner, Molly, and she and I actually tell this story quite a bit, but we were cleaning up at the end of the day, and we had to be out of the studio we were shooting at by a specific time, or else we'd get charged extra money. And we're indie filmmakers, so we're trying not to go overtime. So she and I are helping carry equipment to our grip truck. And we went down this hallway of the studio, and I heard my name. She calls me Mikey. I heard Mikey whispered behind my ear, like she was standing right behind me. So I turned expecting to see her there, but she wasn't there. She was like 30 yards away down at the end of this long hall. And she saw my face shift and be very confused and a little freaked out. And she was like, yes. And I was like, did you just whisper my name? And she said, no. And I was like, and tried to brush it off and act cool and not scared, and carried on. And then later she had some sort of experience, which I won't talk for her, but she like heard something similar to, or something like that. But the studio we were shooting in is Lacey Street Studios in LA, which apparently has a ton of like ghost stories associated with it. And we didn't really know that at the time. And I've never really been able to explain that, but it was my name so crystal clear as a whisper in Molly's voice, which is also an added layer of just strangeness. So yeah, that's the thing that kind of jumps out in my mind. I had some scary stuff happen to me where an old guy in the woods when I went to summer camp threatened to kill all us kids because he didn't like kids and he was going to murder us when we were sleeping and camping out. That was very terrifying, but that was not a paranormal phenomena by any means. That was just a crazy guy in the woods that I think was just trying to scare people. I don't think he was actually going to do anything. But
yeah, that's good. I'm glad he didn't, or you wouldn't be here.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's that's kind of the most. I mean, the most common are ghost stories where you either heard something. Listen, that name could have been. I mean, you want to get weirder? It could have been like a form of ESP. Maybe you like connected.
Absolutely, yeah.
I've got that. That's the only one I have is ghost story. I've never seen a UFO. I'd love to see a UFO.
Me too.
I want one to land pretty close to me, not that close,
yeah.
so I can like get the full video, and then people will say I faked it anyway, and the government will come out and kill me. But yeah, that's what I want to see. But it doesn't look like we have any questions ready. Here's one I can ask. How do you visit something that hasn't happened yet, assuming time is linear and constant?
Ooh, I think I'm stumped because if time is linear and constant, how do you visit something that hasn't happened yet? Huh.
You would have to have an anticipation machine, something that does the variables that this is most likely to happen.
And if you go into like quantum physics where like everything is possible, and that adds an extra layer to it. And yeah, I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah. I guess the answer would be you can't. You got us.
Yeah, there you go.
You got us. If you travel, if time is constant and linear and you go to the future, it is a crapshoot. You could just land on a molten earth and die. And that's it. You're like, oh, I overshot this by 1 million years and the asteroid already came. Dang it. Okay. How do you okay, I read that one. If you go forward in time and can't make it back in time, then how do you come back?
You can't.
You can't.
Isn't that a similar thing? You're stuck. And that's that whole conundrum too of that theory of like, if you can travel through time, you can only go forward. And so once you do that, how do you, like, you're just kind of screwed. Like you talked about space travel. If we can create some sort of warp device and to travel vast distances of space, the way time works in that fashion, I don't think you can go back. Again, I'm a layman. You talked to Mitch Horowitz last time. He knows a lot more about this than I do. But that's an interesting conundrum for sure.
Mitch was awesome. And yeah, it's you're already time traveling. If you speed away from Earth and you go fast enough, you're already time traveling.
That's right.
Like it will be a different time when you get back. You're going forward in time. Now, I guess the hard one would be going backwards in time. Like, how do you go back to something that's already happened? And if it moves linearly, I can never say that word. Like it's already happened. So you can't go back. It's not a fixed point. It's gone.
Yeah.
It's gone. Unless, of course, time exists in all phases at all times at once, which who knows? It's a weird universe. We don't know how it started. They're starting to question the Big Bang now. Like, and I like that. I don't.
And that's kind of my big thing about time travel too. If I had like one point to make is that as much as we keep learning about it and science keeps learning about time, and you talked about the past, present, future all are happening at once. and string theory and wave theory and all these different things. The more we learn about it, obviously it brings up more questions, but it also proves that we know so little about time. Like we're just like barely scratching the surface. And again, that's what kind of excites me about the subject from a supernatural paranormal thing, where I can believe a lot of strange time stories because we know so little about it. So it kind of makes your imagination go wild.
It does. And the phenomenon is weirder than we can possibly imagine. Just with UFOs, and I'll go back to Skinwalker Ranch and the Bigelow group. They've been very quiet about what they found on Skinwalker Ranch. And this was a government funded, like there was real skeptical scientists who went there and came back like, I don't know what the hell it was. We couldn't get anything to repeat. But one of them said, it's what we found out is the phenomenon, UFOs or whatever, far weirder than we could possibly imagine. We can't even get our heads around it. We're still, I say this a lot on my other show. We're just monkeys who just figured out math. That's it. Like,
100%. Yeah. Yeah. And even like you talked about Sir Victor Goddard, and he was talking about UFOs back in the 60s and 70s as being these interdimensional things, and possibly even of from Earth, not from some sort of alien thing. And I think that's such an interesting viewpoint, because if UFOs are real, if people are visiting us from different times or places in the universe, I don't think we can fully comprehend what those are. And it's one of the things of like, if I go down a Reddit rabbit hole and people are like very specific about theories, they're like, it's this kind of craft that is powered by this thing with blah, blah, blah. I'm like, you don't know. Stop being so specific.
Right.
Hey, I have this idea. I obviously might be wrong, but here's my cool idea. But people can be very specific. And when they are, I'm like, you don't know anything.
No, like are the Greys drones? Are they us from the future? A lot of the speculation of us from the future there'll be this smaller, thinner version with a big head. I completely disagree. We're getting bigger as time goes on. We're actually getting bigger. So I think it would be more of a tall alien. Those are the fun conversations to have.
Yeah, exactly.
If you travel forward, I think you just fast forward and events would just happen around you. Do you think, what would you observe?
Yeah, that comes down to like relativity. And, if you're on some kind of ship or something and you're traveling near the speed of light, and, time is affecting you differently. And, but what would you observe? That is again, I feel like that may be more of a question for Mitch Horowitz than myself. That's really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, oh boy, we can go down a rabbit hole on this.
I know, right?
You are your brain. Your brain is energy. Do you have a soul or not? Would it get ripped apart? Would you, like in The Expanse, they didn't go light speed, but when they went into their, I forgot what it was called. It was the Epstein drive. When they fired up the Epstein drive, they had to pump themselves full of drugs just to take it. Would you have to do something like that? That would make sense. That'd be cool.
Mm-hmm.
Or has, like in Web Inc., is it just a portal and they have all that figured out? Like you don't get ripped apart going through, but the trade-off is you better get the hell out at a certain amount of time.
Otherwise you're screwed. Yeah. And the amount of energy, they say, if there is ever some kind of craft or device that allows you to travel near the speed of light, the amount of energy needed is apparently incomprehensible. Like there's no way for us with modern day science to even get close to the amount of energy it would take. So you'd have to have some kind of, wormhole device, something that's bending things instead of making you travel fast. But yeah.
And you know what, like as cool as it would be, do you want our government inventing time travel? I don't. I really don't. If space is 3-dimensional and time and space are intertwined, could time be 3-dimensional?
Yeah. So, I mean, they already talk about time being a 4th dimension, right? So, and again, that gets a little too heady for me, but I do think time is part of that the foundation of the universe. And we're very much 3-dimensional, and we see things as a 3-dimensional thing, but time is that extra dimension that we can't quite see. We can think about it, and obviously physicists and people have a better grasp of that, but I do think time is that extra dimension. And again, it's not linear, so it's it's just an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, it is. I think that's all the time we have today. For today, Michael, thank you for it's been great chatting with you, man.
Yeah, I love it. Talk about this stuff all day. Yeah, I
Oh,
appreciate it.
I really could too. I really hope Hollywood works things out soon so I can just talk about this stuff all day, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Is there anything you'd like to promote?
So the main thing is my podcast, A Study of Strange. You can find it wherever you listen to podcasts. I cover all sorts of strangeness. I do have more time slip stories coming probably later this year. But yeah, that's really sort of a pet project of mine. I started it just because I love podcasts, and I was like, I should see if I can make a podcast. And I just love doing it so much that I'm never going to stop. I directed a film called UMBRA, which is a psychological thriller that is in post-production. So hopefully that is out later this year. So stay tuned for that. But those are the two main things to talk about.
Brilliant. So thanks everyone for attending this episode of ParanormalX podcast with Michael May. I'm Gary Buechler from Nerdrotic. And just a couple of weeks on June 6th, we'll be back with a surprise guest. We love surprise guests. We love surprises around here. Don't forget to get the comic on Kickstarter. Just search ParanormalX on Kickstarter, or you can hit the link below on both live streams. I think we're on Facebook too. What's up, Facebook? And don't forget to subscribe to ParanormalX. You can subscribe to my channel if you want, or Nerdrotic Live, where we have episodes of Forbidden Frontier, which will be back this Sunday. We're going to the Cosmic Summit. Lots of ancient civilization stuff. That's one of my other favorite subjects, Michael, is ancient civilizations. That one it's a great subject right now because there's a lot of really good information, real information on it. So we love that one. So thanks again, everyone, and we'll see you June 6th.